So I was asked, I think back in November, would I come to a presentation kind of on the school report card, graduation pathways, and state testing information. So I kind of just pulled it all together. Today is informal in the sense if you have questions, please ask. I kind of want to go through it in regards to what I have, but I also have like 3 or 4 other slide decks that are uploaded on my computer right now. I can click over different slides and show different things depending on how in depth we want to go. And what exactly you want to look at it, what you're interested in. So without further ado, let's kind of just jump in here. No particular order. I'm going to click on in a second the actual state report card for Berea Mid-Park. So we can actually go through it point by point, because I think that's probably the best way you'll see our data and see how they create those data points. The state report card is just one metric. It is a metric that the state puts out. It ends up in newspapers, it ends up in press releases. It is an important metric for sure, but it is just one metric. It doesn't indicate if your child's happy at school, having a great experience, if they love their teachers or not. That does not show this at all. This metric just says how we're doing on the individual areas of the state report card. And I always joke, no matter how good I've ever had a report card or how well it's turned out, I've never ended an argument with a parent, which I don't like getting arguments with parents, like, hey, if you're like, hey, my kid got beat up at school today. You seen our state report card? It's looking great. Like, that's not how it ends. So it is just a metric. It probably matters, quite honestly, more to me than it does to you, because your experience is through the lens of your child. My kids go to school at Breast Broadview Heights. My experience is through them. I'd like the school to have a good report card, but my real question is, how are Matt and Claire doing? Those are my kids. So mostly based on state test results, and it's not everything that matters isn't on there getting measured through it. So let's look at actually the report card. Okay, so when you see a report card, here are the metrics it comes from. So you can see overall, our school grade is a C. It's just like normal letter grades you experience your entire life, A, B, C, D, F. A is better than B is better than C, etc. C means you're kind of middle of the road. It could be a whole lot worse. Be aware, I think 2 years ago, only 12 high schools in the whole state got an A. And there's about 800 high schools in the state. So don't be lulled into the sense that, hey, it's like, who all gets A's? Not many schools get A's. They're hard to get A's. A lot of B's, a lot of C's, a lot of D's, and unfortunately some F's. So the C comes from all the components here. You can see your components. There are 5 components at a high school level. We'll go through each of those. The one that's not rated, that's the component improving at-risk K-3 readers. That's for elementary schools. We don't have any K-3s here. So that is not, for us, is not rated. So let's go kind of one by one here. If you have questions, please ask. So this achievement, we got a D there. It comes from 2 different metrics. Performance index, indicators met. It's 75-25 if you want the actual breakdown there of how that works. I know it's tough to read here. We received a total of 80.1 points. So what they do is that if a student takes the exam, we'll say that you take the Algebra 1 exam. If you are scored proficient, they give you 3 points on your graduation pathway points, and you get a 1 for the school. So that's what proficient is. It's a 1. If you're accelerated, 1.1, advanced 1.2, accelerated plus 1.3, or advanced plus, sorry. So you're like, how do you get, so you can get more than a 5? You cannot. Advanced plus means you're promoted a grade level ahead. At the high school, that's tough to do. That means you're taking, I don't know, biology as an 8th grader. Now be aware of this. If a student takes biology as an 8th grader, they end up getting their score to the middle school, not the high school, because that's the school they go to. So you can see we had literally 0.2 of a points for advanced plus. So we got 0.1, or my fault, 6.1 from advanced, accelerated 21.3, proficient 34.1. Basic, you get 0.6. Limited 0.3, untested 0. So if you hear me in the spring tell, we need to go into test, if you test and fail, it's better for you and the school than not taking the test at all, because the goal is to get everyone to test. because you need those points to graduate. That makes sense? So if you go down through here, you can see here's your percentage of students that fell into the category, multiply it by the levels, 80.1. A perfect score is 120. Yes?
This is just pretty basic,
yeah.
right? But those are what the kids get on the score of each individual test.
Bingo.
They're labeled as advanced plus, advanced, accelerated, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
No problem. Yes, thank you for clarifying that. So they get a score. The scaled scores out of 700. 725 would be advanced. I'll call it accelerated, and advanced varies by test score. So it bounces up, depends on which test score it is. Usually about 745-ish gets you to the advanced level. The scores are scaled, meaning they take so many number of questions, and there are always test questions there, like they're seeing if they want to use them in the future. So we don't know which ones those are. They get thrown out, and they scale the scores because not all questions are created equal. So more difficult questions get a higher weighted points on the test compared to easier questions. And the questions bounce around throughout the test, so the easiest question might be question 37, not necessarily question 1. So when people ask me like how they score the test, I can tell you that much, but I don't know the actual test until later when they give us back the metrics and say, okay, question 27 was ranked really hard. That's worth more than question 22, which was ranked really easy. And they rank them prior to the test. So it's not like they get all the scores back and say, oh man, 27 was hard for kids. No, they ranked them before they ever gave the test. So that's the 80.1 we got last year. If everyone got a 120 or a advanced, 120 is the perfect score. So you theoretically can go above 120 if you had advanced plus there. So if we scroll down here.
So, sorry, so to get the full points, everyone would have to test at the advanced
Bingo.
level?
You see why it's difficult?
Yeah,
yes.
Shouldn't it be that everybody tests proficient, right? Like,
yes.
Like you know everything that you're supposed to know?
100%.
Okay.
So when you see that score, you're like, hey, they didn't do so bad. Like a lot of kids passed the test. Well, the scale's out of 120. So it's a 10-point scale. So 10 points of, so it's 120 to 108 is an A, 108 to 96 is a B, 96, so it goes down in increments there. So you can see all of a sudden why, like your point exactly, hang on a second, wouldn't 1 be a perfect score? No. So you can see how people misinterpret it like, hey, things are going badly. Well, they're not really going badly. The metric is to get an A, you have to average advanced. So there's a 12-point scale. It just goes down from there. So over here on this side, you have your indicators. To meet your indicator, you have to pass at a rate of 80% or higher. So there you either met it or didn't. It's 80 or it's not. So whether you pass it like at 83.8 or 80 or 96.5, it's just you met it, you checked the box. Literally, they check the box over there. If you're below 80, they give you an X. Just so you're aware, we met 3 indicators: American government, U.S. history, and biology. That's really awesome. The reality is, those are the 3 easiest tests. The hardest test mathematically in the state is geometry. We were 60.5 last year. The overall state average was about 45% passage rate. So understand what that means. Algebra 1 is a very tough high school test. 45.6 is not a great score. I'm not trying to convince you of that. Here's why it's a tough high school test. The best mathematical students take Algebra 1 in 7th and 8th grade. So they're scoring for the middle school, not the high school. So be aware of that when you see those scores. You'll always see the high schools will have a harder time in Algebra 1 because your best mathematical test takers are out of the pool. Whereas in U.S. history, they're all in the pool. Just be aware of those kind of things when you look at those metrics. Certainly 45.6 is not a good score. I'm not trying to convince anyone of that. We need to get a lot better there. But that's a stratified sample size. That's not the entire group of freshmen.
What's that improvement indicator?
Okay, improvement indicator, where are we looking at?
EOC improvement indicator.
Okay, yes, that's my next thing I was getting to. Thank you. You're doing a great job. Those are for students who took a test already and didn't pass the first time, took it a second time, because they need to take it to graduate. So the indicator there is 25% passage rate. We were at 26.2. So basically, if you didn't pass it the first time, they're not anticipating you to get 80%. Like they're saying, look, this test is really going to get a hard time. So if it's going to be that hard, lower the indicator. The other part, just to be aware, and this I feel bad for students on, we try to get them some intervention along the way. If you didn't pass geometry the first time you took it, guess what's happened the second time you took it? You're not in geometry anymore. You moved on to another math class. So it really is difficult to double back. If you didn't pass U.S. history your freshman or sophomore year when you took it, you're now in government. So you might have passed the class when you were near the content. Now you're not near the content anymore because you're not in biology or government or whatever course it is. So it puts the kids in a tough spot there to pass that.
Well, what do they have to score that causes them not pass?
Below 700, a scaled score below 700.
And 700 is considered
Proficient.
proficient?
Yes.
So if they score under 700, they have to take it again?
Theoretically. We'll get to that part later on. I say there's a lot of details here. There are a lot of details. So that's how you get your performance indicator. So they add those up. Chronic absenteeism, that's an entirely different metric. Without going too deep into it, because honestly, the goal this year, I think, is 11.5% of your students are below chronic absenteeism. That is 18 absences or less. So if you're missing more than twice a month, you're considered chronically absent. And the state does not factor in why. So if you're in a car accident and break your back and you're in the hospital for 3 weeks, you're considered chronically absent that year. So even though it's an excused absence, and we know where you were, we know it was a bad situation, you're chronically absent. So some of our students end up being chronically absent because of legitimate medical reasons, family issues. Grandmother passed away in Florida, had to fly down there for the funeral. You were sick for 4 days, this happened. All of a sudden, you've racked up 20 absences, and maybe you took 3 college visits. I mean, legitimate things that we know what you're doing, you still hit that metric for us. So if you're not in the building, so we talk about getting kids to school in attendance. One, we know you have to be here to learn, but the state doesn't factor all those things in. You're not here, you're not here. They're not viewing it as excused versus unexcused. You're not in the building.
That language arts 1, is it 65.4%?
Yes.
Where should we be on that? I'm hoping higher.
Honestly, I think I start all my calculations at 80 and go from there.
Okay.
Now, this is my first year here, so I can't say that I'm responsible for those. This year I'm going to be responsible. We're looking for improvement. I'll show you a chart later on. We'll talk about like 3-year trend data. It's not good for us. And we're trying to work internally to fix why that is the case, because that really is concerning that the scores are going down, not up. At this point in my mind, the scores should be going up, one, because the test isn't as new as it used to be. So we're getting more used to the test, the actual the instrument itself, as well as we should be improving our instruction and learning, and kids are moving in a good direction. If kids are regressing, that's a bad thing. We'll talk about that in a second with one of these metrics here. So any questions about how this gets formulated? Yes?
Not how it's formed, but so the tests are not grade specific, grade level. It's whatever
It's course.
class the student
Yes,
is
it's
in.
course specific, yeah.
So an advanced student, like you said, it might be not taking algebra in high school.
Correct. Yes,
Same with all of them, they're all grade
it's
level.
tied to your course, not your grade. Now, typically we would say a student in biology is probably a sophomore, but we also have our honors bio kids as freshmen. So wherever you take the course is where it falls.
Does honors classes have a different weighting scale, or is it the same test?
Same test. We would anticipate they'd score higher because honors classes are made up. Kids, basically, a lot of times, that's where the gifted kids get shoved. So you'll see a metric here, like gifted indicator, we did not meet. So the gifted indicator is a whole lot higher. We'll click on that real fast. We were 101.4, or 104.4. To meet the indicator, you have to get 117. So they're saying, based on your cognitive ability, you should score advanced as a cohort, basically. Because if all of them scored advanced, they would be a 120. So even though they've all averaged a passing score or better, that's not good enough for how gifted works. Be aware, once gifted, always gifted. Yes, once you test gifted, you're always gifted. And that, to me, that's actually a pretty fair metric, like the idea, because your cognitive ability should not be bouncing around a lot. So if you take the Iowa test in 3rd grade, which I think most of you probably did, you get a score back, you take it again a couple years later, you can always get retested, but once you get classified as gifted, you're always gifted. So maybe you're not even getting gifted services, you're not taking anything outside the typical college prep coursework you're in. The state still expects you to score at that level to meet that indicator. And it doesn't take into, just to be, and this is not excuses, it's just to be factual, it doesn't factor in any other thing other than that one score. So let's say the student who was scored gifted as an 8-year-old in 3rd grade now has social emotional issues, doesn't come to school anymore, isn't taking that kind of curriculum. It doesn't care. It says, hey, they're gifted, why aren't they scoring this way? It doesn't factor in any of the other things that we know happen to people as they go through the school process. So that's what that looks like in regards to gifted. So now we have progress. I like this metric. So what it does is it looks at the progress of your students. So it's a good metric for the school because it's a very macro metric where you're a micro metric. How did you personally do on the test? That's very micro, that's your own kid, how'd they do? So for this one, overall our students got a B. Gifted students got an A. Lowest 20% achievement. That is the lowest 20% of these state students. So what the state does, it takes all 100% of the test takers in Algebra 1. So whatever, not our lowest 20, the state's lowest 20. So it's just a state metric. Some of our kids fall there, not 20% of them, but some of them do fall there. How did they achieve, how did they grow? Student with disabilities, those two groups got Fs. F does not mean fantastic. That's not good. What the state does for this, they predict your score going into an exam of where you will score compared to the rest of the state. So think of like 1 to 100. We don't know, they tell us kind of where a kid's supposed to be, but we don't push it out like you're in the 72nd percentile, you're in the 84th percentile, you're in the 11th percentile. And if it goes well and you meet growth, you stay exactly on the normative curve where you were. So you're still at 73, you're still at 83 or 82, you're still at 11. So everything, that would put you right at expected growth. If you increase by 2 points, you're above expected growth. If you decrease, you're below expected growth. So based on the large numbers of 500 test takers, that tells you where you're going. So that's the overall. So to give you an indication of this, we get it by subject area. The red means below expected growth. So last year in English 9, to your question, our kids as a cohort fell 2 points behind where they're supposed to score or more. That's not good news. Where you can see in English 10 in geometry, they increased 2 points beyond what they were predicted to do. The algebra, students made progress similar to state expectations. So of the 4 areas where you get value added, we were even on 1, ahead on 2, and behind on 1. So that's how that metric gets formed. What this tells you, these 2 groups slid back on the normative curve. If you're sliding back, even though overall you might have gotten above 2, they'll dock you points because you have subgroups not achieving. That's just how it works. And that to me is not unfair because they want you to say all of the students matter, not just the typical students. You're focusing on your subgroups as well. But be aware of how that works.
What do they define a disability as?
We identify a student through the special education process. They're on an IEP with a known disability.
So 504s don't count for that?
No. Nope. So it'd have to be a student with a diagnosed and agreed upon disability by the school, and they're on a special education plan. They have an IEP in place. I like this metric because it starts where you are and predicts where you're supposed to go. Now, people debate like the statistics behind it, which you can get in that deep dive if you want. But the reality is, if you were supposed to be at 77%, did you get there or did you increase? Now, some schools really struggle with this because their students score so high year to year. If you're in the 99th percentile, you have to score there again to hold your own. So if you go to 97th percentile or 96th, you're actually regressing compared to the rest of the state. So be aware that if you hear in the news, right now Solon's in the news for that exact thing. One of their schools is a school choice now school because of the way the state law is written. And they're there because I think it was third grade, 21% of their student body got perfect scores on the reading test. And the next year only 14% got perfect scores on the reading test. They still have like our growth score, like our performance score was 80, the building is 114. But they regressed because the kids can't getting a perfect hard. Yeah. So it went from 21 to 14. They still did quite well. There's nothing not like they're concerned about their kids, but they regressed. So be aware of that metric. So as long as you hear things publicly, like the media, like, hey, that's not a good metric. Well, the metric is about growth, and if you're near the top, it's hard to get more growth. So for us, quite honestly, getting the gifted kids to grow is a pretty important part. But based on the previous metric of 104, they're probably not achieving what they should begin with. They should be scoring much higher. So we put it all together and try to like get evidence from it and what can we glean from it.
So just because gifted got an A there doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing as good as they should be.
Correct. Yes.
And just because a group in the group that scores lower on the achievement, but they do good in the progress, shouldn't mean that we're happy with that.
Correct. Yes.
Because they're still.
Yeah. You may not be happy because there's
Right.
more. They should be doing more.
Right.
Yes. So we'd like to put all the metrics together and look at them we take them out individually and put them out together and say, what does this really mean? Yes, we're excited for our gifted kids here got an A, but our gifted kids overall got a 104 on progress. That is well below what the state expects them to do. And quite honestly, 104 for a gifted kid is not a great score. I'd like to see them at minimum above about 110 or higher. So we'll talk about how are we servicing our top students. We know they have tremendous cognitive ability. What courses are they taking? How are we, because they're identified. We can track them. We know who they are. We can say, what courses are they taking? What supports are they getting? Because quite frankly, based on their academic and cognitive ability, they should be performing differently. That make sense? Whereas if you're in the students the lowest 20% of achievement, you've been there historically, they're predicting you're going to score there. We'd have to get you out of that range. So think of that as like almost the inverse of the gifted of where they fall. But this is good because the teachers get this individually as well, per teacher. So I can look at our staff and say, when students go to room X, they're likely to get more growth than room Y. Yes. So, and it does a multiple year data set. So it adds more validity to it because sometimes like teachers are like, look, I just had a great class this year. They're awesome. They learned a ton. Or it's a tough year. I got a lot of issues in the room. So they put multiple years together so that you can get a truer picture of where they are. So really it's a 3-year data set.
You don't think that this causes teachers to teach for just the test? I mean, because
we
again,
worry
you
about
can hold
yeah.
these two teachers accountable against each other. Doesn't that
Yeah.
then say, well, I'm just going to teach what's on the test and not have the classroom as much fun as this or whatever,
Well,
maybe not the same experiences?
That's a great question. I think that's, if we're doing what we're supposed to, it's not true. The tests are based on the standards, which we've always taught the standards. How you teach is still up to you in your room. So if you decide to try to morph the class into just preparing for this test, and that's a really tough thing to do. These tests are pretty well written. Also, you're not sure how many questions will be asked per standard. So it's really hard to say, like, I know I have to cover all this curriculum, but it's hard to say this is the most important part versus this part. Now, do we use that data? Of course we do. For example, we have 3 years worth of data of how many standards were asked, when they were asked, what year, what test they were asked, how many times they were asked, to try to help us hone in on what's the most important part of the test. Because when we look at something like, let's say geometry, there's state standards. It's 1 credit of high school geometry. I had a math teacher tell me once, he's like, I don't know why this is like, it's so arbitrary. He's like, we could teach geometry till the end of time and still not cover it all. Like, he's like, it's almost infinite. They're getting 1 credit of high school geometry, so we try to make sure we're covering what's on the standards at the depth and rigor that needs to be covered at. But it's really hard to focus in and say, I'm going to make sure we crush this exam. In fact, I wish they would say that, because that means they're teaching the curriculum and the content. And I think probably the best analogy for a group of interested parents is, it's like training for the driver's test. Well, you got to drive your car. The more you drive, the better you're going to do. So is that bad for the kid? No, that's a great way to pass the test. So the same thing here. Like, if we're getting you ready for the, like, we're doing what is preparing you for this because it's what's actually good. I've never had a teacher read an actual content standard and say, that one doesn't make sense. They all make sense. It's just what level you teach them at and the frequency you teach them at. So that's progress. Okay, gap closing. So in gap closing, you have language arts, math, graduation rate, and English language learners. So what the state does is they actually put out predicted scores you should get. So if you look at this bar graph right here, so the state said that our Asian or Pacific Islander population has a goal of 97.9 last year. They actually scored 79. They fell well below the goal. The goal is based on previous test scores, and what they anticipate is growth. So you can see in math, all the little red dots, except for one, is beyond where we scored. So the keys down here, I know it doesn't translate well. Student with disabilities, 48.3. So those numbers get created the same way that we had, remember the original, you got a advanced is 1.2, accelerated is 1.1, proficient 1. So when they took all of our students with disabilities and added up their score in math, 48.3 was the number they got to. But you can see they predicted out here of 60.5. We underachieved, in their opinion, on this metric. And also remember the previous one, progress, we got an F. So that's where that's coming from. So those all kind of get fed together. So if you're starting to think about the math here and figure out how it works, if you start doing poorly in one area, it impacts multiple areas. And the inverse is also true. If you do great in an area, it starts to impact other areas as well. So there's an example of math, ELA. The anomaly here for us, and the good news, is graduation rate. You can see where the red dots are. We exceeded it in every single area. So when I say that, like, this is just one metric, the test scores are one metric, our kids are still graduating, which is really the goal of why we came here to begin with. Get your education, get your diploma, and move forward. But we'll get into more of that later. We'll talk about graduation pathways and ways to get that done. But be aware of that. And English language learners, we don't get a score. You have to have 20 students in a subgroup to get a score. If you're below 20, they're afraid of putting a score up because it becomes identifiable for the kids. Because then you can look around as a community member like, oh, there's one of those. There's whatever group that is. So be aware, if you drop below 20, it used to be 30, it's going to get down to, I think, 15 or 10 down the road. But they're moving it down there. They're that direction slowly. So to give you a better grasp of it, let me jump in here, different presentation real quick. Okay, so here's what we get as a school. Here's math. So total tests taken, you can see our building has 4 American Indian or Alaskan natives. So we don't get a score there. But we have 4 students who identified themselves that way. So you can see the 20 is the cutoff, so you can see ones above, this column's above 20. English language learners, 13. That's why I don't get a score there. Make sense? So as you come across here, you can see where we made improvements and where we got our indicators. And you can get 100 points, part of 100 points. So that's how you earn your points. I don't want to go into that metric a whole lot tonight just because I don't think it's. You can see in English. So our goal was 73.4, 79. So the green met the goal. So I highlight that. This is for our staff when we get back from summer break, we look at this stuff. So you're getting 200 points there because you actually met it. Graduation, We got 100 each time. There's 7 of those there, we got 100. That leads you to, when you do the math, the formula, 64.8. When you add all those together with your ELA, your math, and your graduation points, that's what you get. So that's how that's formulated. That changes year to year by your group and how well they score. If they met their goal, either short-term goal, long-term goal, or just growth. Yes?
You know, something that I heard on Learning Heroes website and webinar is, and I've seen it in the National PTA podcasts and things, is that parents tend to be very focused on their students' grades as a measurement of their success. So if your kid's bringing home A's and B's,
Yes, we've taught you that over the years of education for the last 100
all right,
years.
That's great, they're doing great, I don't have to worry about them. But the reality is, the percentage of those kids, even that are learning, or are prepared, I guess, proficiently in those subject areas is far less. So one of the things that Learning Heroes is trying to promote, right, is so that parents get visibility into more data points, right, so that you can kind of try to triangulate how your kid, like, are they learning what they're supposed to be learning, and are they actually ready? And so when I look at this data and I see our achievement scores are low, our progress is okay, our gap closing not so great, but our graduation rate, good. It concerns me that kids are just, going out there, and I'm not, I'm sure they're all doing decently, but I guess I just wonder what your take is on all of that and how we should be looking at things.
So that's one thing that we talk about internally quite a bit. What does a grade mean? And we're working on that this year. It's going to work continue next year. So one of the things that we talk about, we're working on right now, and I know there's a whole grading committee for the district being put together. What should be in a grade? I would say at a high school level, quite honestly, it should be between 70 and 80% assessment based and 20 to 30% just other, meaning compliance grades, meaning you turn your homework in and I give you a check grade. Because what ends up happening is if you create an improper balance, students can do really well in all the play school well stuff and not actually learn the material. And they prefer that. I mean, I always cringe as a principal, as an educator, when people are like, I get my kids bonus points for going to the choir concert. I'm like, whoa, hang on a second. Like, that's nice they went to the choir concert, but how's that relate to their math? Because you're inflating the grade. You're playing, so, and I think most of those practices we've kind of stopped. I know they exist in pockets, but the real question is, what's the assessment look like? What are we assessing? Is it the proper rigor? So that when the student does well there, we have a metric to come over here and look at it. So what we do is we look at your semester grade versus in the course exam grade. We would like to have a strong correlation. So we can then figure out, so at my last district, we realized, we actually did the correlational coefficient, Pearson's if you like stats, the correlational coefficient. We found a 0.6 correlation between an A equals a 5 on the end of course exam, B is a 4, C is a 3, D is a 2, F's a 1. If we did it C or better as a passing score, it went up to a 0.879. Meaning we had tremendous confidence. If you had a C or better, you're going to pass the end of course exam. Where it got dicey were kids who got D's. Honestly, they were passing, they just didn't play school well. So they got D's but never did their homework, is really what happened. So we knew who to intervene with. And that's where I think we're struggling right now a little bit, is that our grades, the kids are getting A's and B's and getting 1s and 2s. They're getting D's and getting 4s. So they're not correlated very well. There's not a great, and I'm not saying it's causation, I'm saying correlation. So be careful when we talk about stats in that regard of like what it really means. I know there should be a correlation, and the causation should be, I got a good grade on all those tests, I did well on this next test. It should come right, should be in concert. Bingo, yes, I've actually learned the material. So we'll get this prepared for success metric in a second. It's getting to your exact point. So graduation rate. Okay, graduation rate comes across the board here. There's a 4-year cohort and a 5-year cohort. So when a student enters Berea Mid-Park High School, we have 4 years to get them to graduate. The reason for that, if you take longer than 4 years to graduate, your chance of graduating is almost zero. They know that. So the state started to say, oh, we're just going to graduate. No, we have 4 years. We start counting the day you get here. We start counting credits. We talk to kids at day 1. You need to count to 22. That's a real thing. So last year, 93% of our kids graduated in 4 years. The 5-year cohort rate was 91.3. So the class, and you're always a year behind, so the class of 18 had a 93% graduation rate. Class of 17 after 5 years is 91.3. There is no 6th year cohort because the state knows, statistically speaking, no one graduates in 6 years. Either do it in 4 or 5 or it just doesn't happen, which is a scary thought. But that also means we don't have any 20-year-olds here. Yeah, it's like you have basically either you make it out that fast or you don't make it out with your diploma. So for us, we know 4 years is a real thing. There's your A is 95 or better, B is 90 to 94. You can see your breakdown here of how that's formed. Here's our trend data over the last so many years. We don't have another data point here because they don't have their 5th year yet. That will come this year because they've been out of high school now since they've been out a year, so this will be the 5th year for that class to come through. Make sense? Now the good news is our kids are getting through, they are graduating. This is not great news. This metric talks about college and career ready when they leave, what that means for us, what that looks like. So, each kid who comes through, number of students that earned a remediation score on all parts of the ACT and SAT, earned an honors diploma, and or earned an industry recognized credential. An industry recognized credential means you went to Polaris and got a skill and passed the credential test. So, not all their programs have industry credentials, but a lot of them do. They have state test, STNA, cosmetology, etc. So they go there and they get their skill, they pass the state exam, they're ready to go. So we had 445 students do that. Okay, number of bonus. Students that count an additional 0.3 bonus points each because they did the above and also earned 3 or higher in an AP exam or an AP school, not an IB school. So we had 259 students do that, so 0.3 is 77.7. Add those two together, you get 522.7. And we had in the 2-year cohort 1,015 graduates. The goal would be 1-to-1, meaning every kid who leaves you is college or career ready. So that would be a perfect score.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the second one? Was for 0.3?
Yeah, if you take an AP exam and score 3 or higher on it. Meaning, or you get college credit is the other way to do that.
Where does college credit plus fit in there, or doesn't it?
It fits
Is
right,
the
yeah.
bottom one?
Yeah, right here.
Okay.
So
Earned
why
at least
is it
3
less
college
than
credits.
one? Or is that an additional, like, bonus points?
It's bonus points.
Got it.
So we got 77 bonus points for kids who did AP or college credit plus who were earning credits that way. Because they're saying, look, they're not only ready for college, they're already doing it now. Like they're rolling.
So what do the other graduates get? If only 445 got 1 point.
They're not deemed to be ready for college and career.
So they graduated, but they're not smart.
They're not ready for life after high school.
Huh?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't seem to take into the biomedical engineering. They get 12 credit hours, but they don't fit into that second category.
12 credit hours of college,
Yeah.
it's right there. At least
Oh,
3
are
college
they-
credits.
But no, oh, is that college credit plus?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then none of those college credit plus. That's that.
So 73% of our students took the ACT when they were in high school. Yes. Is it possible for a kid to not tie their score to us? Yes, they can. I mean, you can go take it and say, I'm unattached, but typically our kids will end up with the score. Of that, 29.4% of our students, this is not just to be clear, this is the entire student body, not it's not 29.4 of the 73, it's 29.4% of the student body. So understand, like, you added the whole body back in. So of that 29.4, of our 500 graduates, or 1,015 are considered remediation free on the ACT.
Which means that they wouldn't have to take any remedial courses
Bingo.
in college?
Yes.
Okay.
They walk into college,
Low.
and that means they got an 18 on English, 22 on math, and 21 on reading. That means you're remediation free and can go into college and be successful. Okay, SAT, only 10% of our student body took the SAT. SAT is not the standard test in the Midwest, so do not feel like that's it also explains, because SAT is typically taken by our top students, why the number's about the same. Because SAT is taken when you want to go to the East Coast or West Coast, and our top students are the ones who matriculate that way. So don't feel bad when you're like, hey, like, why so few kids take the SAT? Well, because in Ohio you don't need that unless you're going to leave the Midwest and go to East Coast or West Coast.
So, but just a quick question.
Yeah.
So really, if we had 70 some up at the top and 10, but some will take both the ACT and the
Yes.
SAT.
Yes.
Okay. But is there any way to know what percentage does not take any?
Yeah. We know. We can't release that because it's kids' names. But yes.
Okay. Although if they're going into career, that may not be necessary.
That is correct. Yeah. So then we have honors diploma. 24% of our students got an honors diploma. You can see that equates up here with honors diploma means you got the 1. 10% of our kids got a recognized industry credential. So they have a serviceable skill. 33% of our kids took an AP exam, and 21% got a 3 or better. So really, our kids who take the AP exams, 73% got a 3 or better, but that's the overall of the 1,000 plus that ended up with that. Dual enrollment, that's your College Credit Plus, that's your Biomed, that's going to Tri-C, that's going to Cleveland State, LCC, wherever you're taking classes. That's where that cohort falls. Then we have one student who had some IB coursework and an IB exam. That's 0.2, so it probably literally is like 1 or 2 kids. We had an IB program where we did an exchange with Westlake, is what that probably falls from. International Baccalaureate. It's kind of, it's equivalent to AP. Schools pick which one. So that's where that falls. So that's a metric to us that's really important. And we know that metric also drives other metrics as well. So I know kids who take more AP classes, take more rigorous curriculum, score better on the AP exams, SAT, score better on the ACT, more likely to get an honors diploma. So there's a lot of things, because we know the more rigorous curriculum you take, the more prepared you are for life after high school. So that's what we're talking about right now. We have, last year, 52% of our students matriculated to a university the year after graduation. Of that, only half took an AP course. I would suggest every one of them should take an AP course, at least one, to prepare them for the reading, the writing, the thinking, the analyzation. That's going to be my right off the top. Like, anyone who's going to college, you need to take an AP course. We have like 15 right now, we're adding 2 more next year. There's plenty to pick from. There are a variety of subjects. Find one that resonates with you and take it. I also would suggest most kids who are college bound, if you know it, out of 8th grade, take some honors courses in high school. Start early, start the track, because honors leads the AP track to get you more prepared. Okay, so that is the state report card. General questions or clarifications or statements at this point before I jump into kind of the graduation pathway stuff? Yes.
It would be great, and you might be planning to do this before we're done, or maybe we need more time, but would you be able to talk about, like, are there some direct efforts that parents could be helpful in terms of trying to help achieve the goals
Yes.
that you guys are setting?
Yes, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, so let's look at some graduation pathway stuff here. So it should go a little faster from this point forward. Okay, so how you have to graduate? You need credits, and you need one of the pathways. So you have to be college and career ready or complete one of the other 3 pathways as of right now. Now bear with me here. They are actively changing the pathways literally as we speak. so understand some of this, it's set for this class, but going forward, there are definitely changes coming.
So for the people who are in 8th grade, they'll have different pathways for the
Bingo.
people that are in 9th
Yes,
grade.
I have a graphic for you later. Yes. Okay, 22 credits. That is a non-negotiable. You can get all the 5s on end-of-course exams you want. If you don't have 22 credits, you can't graduate. 22 is a real number. So when you hear me talk to freshmen, the first day I see them, I'm like, guys, we're going to count to 22. The day you start here, we are counting to 22. That's a real thing. So if you're not getting credits, you're not going to graduate. It's that simple. I don't care how great your test scores are or what else you have going, you cannot graduate. So that's the most important part to get going. Okay, pathway 1, end-of-course exams. Everything on the state report card we looked at is based on that. You saw those scores, you get a score of 1 to 5, 3 means you passed, and you're good to go. Pathway 2, industry credential and workplace readiness. There are work keys exams our students take that shows their workplace readiness. Those exams our kids do very well on. That's why our graduation rate is the way it is right now. Because they're finding that pathway number 2, because pathway number 1, you can tell they're not all meeting that pathway. Okay? Pathway 3, college and career readiness. This is probably not your friend as the pathway. If pathway 1 and 2 aren't working, that means you get a college readiness score on the ACT or SAT. This is a harder test than this. So the chance of you doing poorly here and well here is pretty limited. Now, it's possible. Typically what I've seen students do, if they go that pathway, they skip all the state tests and they just take the ACT. I'll give you an example. I once had a student, her mother asked me how I thought she would do with her high school schedule. If she should take honors classes or not. I said, well, I don't know your daughter. You know her better than I do, but I would suggest maybe 1 or 2. She's like, well, as an 8th grader, she took the ACT and got a 33. I said, put her as many as you want. Let's just load it up. Give her the full boat. She'll be fine. Her academic ability is off the charts. As a 13-year-old, she got a 33 on the ACT. She skipped the end-of-course exams. I didn't want her to. As a principal, I'm like, please take as many tests as possible. You're guaranteed 5s. Let's get this.
Students don't have to take the state test.
No. They can opt out of it.
But every student who doesn't take subtracts points.
Yes. From a district standpoint, it doesn't help.
Right.
I would also, and I've had parents ask me this for years, what do I think? I said, if it were my child, first off, selfishly as a principal, I want you to. But my kids don't owe the principal at their school any great thing, nor do the students here. You're putting your eggs in a basket, going back and taking the Algebra 1 exam 3 years after you got out of the class, probably gonna be hard. I'd sit for the exam. Unless you're kind of one of those morally opposed to state testing people, I would sit for the exam. I would have my kids sit for the exam. And if it doesn't go well, we have other options, but putting your eggs in the basket of the ACT and taking that exam and finding out it didn't go so well, that's a dice roll that I don't think I would take for my kid. Because then it gets real stressful senior year to try to figure out what other pathway we can go. But no, you don't have to take those exams. And typically, I've had students opt out of them. I mean, usually 5 to 10 kids a year in my career have opted out for family reasons, just they already have an ACT score. A lot of times their parents are like, look, we don't believe in standardized testing. I said, okay, that's a family choice. Just give me your opt-out letter and we'll move forward. Okay, what you need to know about the test. Your state test happen into courses as the test assesses. So you take geometry when you're in geometry. It's not tied to your grade level, as you pointed out earlier. You don't take it junior year, you take it when you take the course. They're important. We talked about the pathways. You take the test online. Here's my advice to everyone in the room if you have kids taking these. These tests are cumulative. You can't really cram for them. People are like, well, can I get my kid like a study guide? Well, you can, but that's not really how it works. You're talking about a year's worth of material, and we're not sure which questions they're going to ask or not. So they're going to take the whole year you had and condense it to 50 questions. So don't think you can kind of cheat the exam and fake it out. You kind of have to know geometry. You have to know English 10. You can't just go in well, I want to make this. I'll fake my way through it. If you try that, typically kids do very poorly. You have to actually know geometry, which seems fair on a geometry test. Okay, so which courses have tests and when will my child take them? So typically, this is, I put the asterisk there, when you take your exams, this year's freshman class, English 1 is gone. So they got rid of that entirely. The sophomores can take it still, because then you take it or repeat it because they didn't pass the first time. But our freshmen will not take the English exam. They'll take Algebra 1. Here, 10th grade courses, you have English 2 still, geometry, biology, U.S. history, U.S. government. I would not be surprised down the road if geometry goes away. At the state level, they'd like it to go away, but there's federal legislation suggesting geometry should stay. So there's some back and forth petitioning going on. For this year, it's in place, but down the road, in all likelihood, it'll probably cease to exist at some point. And that's probably a good thing. I think we're doing a lot of testing that probably isn't necessary as a personal editorial. So that's where the tests fall. Historically, biology, U.S., history, and U.S. Gov are the 3 easiest to get your points. Okay, how it works. You need 18 points. So when we talked about getting points, you rack up points, but you have to get 4 in English, 4 in algebra and geometry, and 6 in social studies and science. So you need 18 total, but it doesn't matter. So let's say you're great at math. You got 5 in algebra 1, 5 in geometry. You're at 10. But English is really kicking your butt. You need 4 points still. So it lets you mix and match a little bit, but you cannot get 2 1s in English, get a 5 in algebra, 5 in geometry, and a 5 in biology, and you're like, okay, 5, 5, 5 is 15. I got 2 points in English, I'm at 17. I'll take U.S. history and get a 1. I'm at 18, I'm done. You have to have the minimums at all those. Max of 35 points. There's the breakdown graduation points versus performance level of where it falls. 3 is what you want. You need, if you get 7 3s, you're at 21. Yes.
So on here it says advanced, accelerated, and proficient, basic,
Yeah.
limited, but on the state testing report card, there was advanced plus.
Yes. That means your grade level advanced. That would
Oh,
be,
you told us
yes.
that.
If you're an 8th grader taking geometry, or my fault, if you're an 8th grader taking biology, that's
Okay.
advanced plus.
So if an 8th grader who takes geometry and they get an advanced on their test, then that really scores as an advanced plus.
Yes. Not for the high school, the building they're in, which is middle school. Yes. So
So is that why they're not accelerating some kids now to keep them at their level?
absolutely not.
Okay.
No, we would never try to manipulate that for the good of a state report card. Those kids are going to do great wherever they are. No, if they're not accelerating, it's probably based on some internal test scores they've obtained and looked at, or some other metrics they're using. Usually math acceleration is pretty straightforward of whatever metric they're using, whether it's an Iowa score, a MAP score. There's usually a lot of data points behind that, from my experience. So that's how that looks in regards to the points they get, how they earn points, etc. Okay, here's the graphic you were asking about earlier. So yes, you can see by class, there's a change every year. So we're tracking this for us. Okay, so class of 18 and 19. You have the 3 pathways. You have pathway number 1, that is 18 points. Pathway 2, industry credential. Pathway 3, a college career readiness score. You also have additional graduation options. That is community service, that's a capstone project, that is a job, proving you're doing something there. That's being used for kids who cannot get the points or any other pathway. The permanent requirements, we'll click on those in a second. Those are things that are going to go into effect for the class of 23 and beyond. Class of 20, you have 3 pathways, modified additional graduation options. What they're doing is honestly, and it's got to get in the weeds, so I can show you, you can look it up later if you want. It talks about GPA requirements, other things. It's basically just modifying the original ones. It took attendance out of the mix. So you used to have an attendance requirement. And then permanent requirements there. 21 and 22, 3 pathways, permanent requirements, and 23 and beyond, permanent requirements. So you have to make those to graduate. 22 is still a thing, and meet the requirements there. We're doing something called State System of Diploma Seals. You have to get 2 seals to make it. So you can do a readiness seal to Ohio Means Jobs, a seal of biliteracy, and you speak more than one language. Industry recognized credential seal, college readiness seal, that would be the ACT or SAT, military enlistment seal. So if you're going to the military, they will give you a seal, that's one of your 2 things you have to do. Science seal, that's the biology exam, or a AP biology passing score. Same thing with honors diploma seal. That hasn't changed. There's a link there to all the different types of honors diplomas. Technology seal, that means you have a passing score on a state recognized course or an AP exam in AP computer science. Citizenship seal, that's the government exam or AP Gov. Fine Arts Performance Arts seal, you can see these are locally defined. We're so new on this, we have not defined them locally because we don't have state guidance yet. I'm going to a meeting next month with our guidance team. We're going to start actually writing those out because when the state's finally give us some guidance on that. So that's how that looks down the road. So you're going to see a de-emphasis on the end-of-course exam, 18 points, and emphasis on this, which everyone believes is good because it's a more holistic view of a child, of what they're doing as opposed to
How many do you have to get?
2.
That's it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a moving target right now as far as the development of it, state guidance on it, but that's where it's going because there's been a lot of pushback from schools, from communities of, hey, this 18 points thing really isn't working. Why do these students need to do this? It's prohibiting graduation. So they've developed this. They're also going to rework the state report card. The state report card was never meant for how they rank order. It was meant to be like show schools how they're doing, but then they went ahead and ranked everybody out and put it in the newspaper. So it became very competitive and used for all kinds of things it was never intended for. It was meant to say, hey, here's where you are, here's where we need you to grow to. Not really, but as soon as you slap a letter grade on something, as you found tonight, there's a lot of inside data that if you don't understand, like a C doesn't really mean it's that bad because that means everyone's proficient. That seems okay, right? But on their metric, that's a C. So just be aware of those things. There's plenty of information at the state website for this kind of stuff you can check out. Okay, state test this year are these dates. And if you have any questions. So the question came up, and I was going to make sure I hit on this tonight anyhow. What can we do to support our children? Here's what I'm going to suggest. We need to find the appropriate level of difficulty for our kids with courses they take. That is a family decision. That's something you have to talk to your child about, of what expectations look like. And what I mean by that is, I would suggest a high school freshman should have between 1 and 2 hours of work outside of class a day. Now that includes study hall, that includes, so not necessarily at home, but like that's a reasonable amount for a freshman to do. If they're doing 4 hours a night, that is way too much, in my opinion. But what I've always found is our top students are doing too much. They're taking home a book bag and like another bag of stuff every night. Our middle of the road students are doing like a half hour, and our poorest performing students are doing nothing outside of school. So we have to talk about what is the appropriate level of rigor. What's the appropriate level of struggle they should have? If you ask me, and I've had people ask me like, how many AP classes should my kid take? My answer is, it's not my kid, I don't know, but I think like 6 is too many. So the question is, where do they want to go? When I start asking that question, if you ask me what your kids should take, what do they want to do after high school? Where do they want to do it at? And what kind of schools they're interested in going to? Or if you're going to work credential, if you're going to Polaris and precision machining, that is a great occupation. They can't hire them fast enough. It's a guaranteed job after high school. And I think starting pay is like close to like $30 an hour. Yeah. They're getting paid. I would suggest that student doesn't need to take AP chemistry. It serves no purpose. I'd say AP Lit for that kid is not a good use of his or her time. So we try to create a schedule that makes sense for them, but they need to engage. The best thing you can do is engage in the work. We're working on our end right now to talk about the level of difficulty of courses. What's a grade mean? How much grade should be made up of just I'm involved, I'm being compliant versus assessment? Now that's going to be a major change for some people. Because I know right now, I had staff members tell me this year they're like 50-50. 50% assessment, 50% compliance. Meaning I did my homework, you give me 10 points. I did the lab, I did the activity in class, you give me 20 points. I may not learn anything, I just turned it in. Now, there's always some high school stuff that will have compliance grades because you want them to read the books, so you gave them 3 questions to answer. But we need to switch that balance over, which is going to be tough for kids because they're used to getting points because they played school well. They turned the work in. They showed up on time. That doesn't mean they learned anything, though. So that's a shift we're going to make somewhat subtly and but deliberately, and we're having this discussion with our staff right now of what does that mean? And that's the grading part. And I'll go back and reiterate, I think challenging yourself academically is a really good thing. I've been talking to students for the last few weeks. They want to drop classes now. Well, the class is hard. Hard and bad are not the same. Hard isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily fun, but like going through the process. If we all are honest, some of the things we did that were hard are really rewarding and they're beneficial. So if it makes you a better thinker, I'd stay in the class. Makes you better communicating, makes you a better writer. Those are all things that I would say that's probably good for you as a 16 or 17-year-old. Stay in the room, fight that, and fight through it because it'll make you better the next step. Because at some point, you're gonna have to do those things as an adult, and having that skill set is a really, really good background. That's my advice, you gotta go through the process. Yeah.
So I have a question. I have a student who has taken 2 honors classes now, was recommended for an AP class, ultimately decided not to do it because they're going to be going to Polaris and want to shift their focus there. But the debate in our household was if someone takes like the harder classes, the AP, the honors, and they do more poorly, does colleges look at, like, do they weigh that student tried a harder class, or are they looking at GPA only? Like, how are they looking at it?
It's going to depend on the institution. I mean, so to give a blanket statement is a little bit difficult there. Typically what you'll find, colleges have a hard time knowing what a local class looks like. Like, let's say, English 11 at Brigham Mid-Park High School, how's that compared to English 11 at Reynoldsburg and Columbus? How's it compared to English 11 at Tiffin High? They don't know. They know what AP means. They also know you challenged yourself and went out there. So typically that's going to get you more credence. But that's why the ACT and SAT become important, because those are metrics that are national metrics. They know what those mean. So that'll give them a better indicator kind of where it's going to be. But they're looking kind of at the whole child. If we want to talk more offline about schools you might be interested in, we can get that discussion. I think that's where it gets very, very micro and very personal of, okay, if you're going to school, I don't know, Ashland, where I went to undergrad, here's what they're going to focus on. We need to get you to an advisor there and have that conversation of what they're looking for. Because there's a lot of different individual metrics that our counselors will be able to help you with that you can work through the process. Typically speaking, they want you to take harder classes. And if you're looking at like a tier upper 2 university, they're going to flat out ask you why you didn't do it. I mean, if you start looking at those schools, like what was the holdup? Why didn't you challenge yourself? That'll be the question they're going to ask. Any other questions?
So you talked about making sure that we push our kids,
Yeah.
well, like get the right fit
Yeah.
for the right kid.
Yes,
and
thank
have
you,
them be
yes.
challenged. One thing I find hard to do is get information. Like when my son, I have a 9th grader. So as we work through 9th grade, I find out as he goes through it, and very infrequently am I getting the information before to help him. For instance, scheduling has been frustrating for me since he started picking classes, which
Okay.
hasn't been that long. But it just feels like I'm trying to find the information and struggling figuring out where to do that. And so I'm great for my next kid because I've made it to 9th grade right now.
We're out the kinks with him?
Right. But I feel bad because I'm sure there's sometimes when opportunities I wasn't aware of because he was my first. And then he didn't get those opportunities because we didn't know about them. For instance, the engineering and biomed program. It wasn't a conversation we had. Probably might have been something we would have had
Pursued,
the
yeah.
conversation. And so that's where I get really frustrated. And I don't think I'm an uninformed parent. I mean,
You're here, so you're obviously somewhat involved. That for us is an ongoing concern. I don't have a ready-made answer for you. We try to communicate. We try to make sure the student's aware. We certainly want to keep the parents a part of it because he's 14 or 15 and left his own devices. He probably does a lot of things you don't love. Yeah, it's because he's 14 or 15. That's kind of the world he lives in. He traffics there. And this group is a great group. I asked this question a while ago. How do we communicate in a way that our message is effective? And this is not to put you on the spot. I'm just explaining kind of my concern is we have parent information nights, and we have like 5 people show up.
Right.
We send out information. We try to. So we're trying to get creative. Of how do we get information in front of people in a way that is logical, that makes sense, that is time relevant. Because we have the same concern. We think kids are making a bunch of decisions blindly that are not overly informed. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not so great. And the parent is so involved after the fact, usually when there's a problem, like, hey, do you know your kid did the X? You're like, he did what? Like, yeah, that's what he did. Like, we're as shocked as anybody. So we're trying to figure that out, and I don't have a great answer for you, but we're very much concerned that I don't think that parents are as knowledgeable about it as we want them to be. And I'm not blaming the parent by any means. I'm just saying that that's a concern, and we're looking at options to try to address that.
Even some kind of parent mentor program where you match up kids who are in a similar situation with parents who've gone through it already or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways. I mean, even sometimes getting letters home where I have to figure out what the acronyms are, and there's nowhere on that letter that tells me what they are, and so then I have to Google what it is. What is PBIS? I know what it is now, but when I first saw it, there was no explanation for it.
That's great feedback for us if we're doing that. I would say the simplest way to get information is call your child's counselor. They're actually paid to do exactly this college and career planning. This is exactly, they do other things as well, but this is exactly their wheelhouse. They should be the most knowledgeable person in the building about whatever plan we're looking at, what we're talking about, options. I know I'm new, so they're getting used to like how I like things to go, but I think we're getting in a better spot there of kind of like really pushing academia and challenging ourselves. But yeah, that's where I would start my conversation. But we have ways to go in that department, quite frankly, of meeting with kids, of putting real plans together. At some point, what I want is every kid to have a plan for 4 years, and we'll change the plan whenever he or she wants. But then the parent sees the plan. We have the plan. We talk about what you're going to do. And kids will change their minds, but at least we kind of have an ongoing document. Like sophomore year, you want to go to Polaris. Sophomore summer, you changed your mind, said I'm not going to Polaris. Now I'm going to go. I'm going to get a summer job. I'm going to do an internship, and I think I'd like to do a job that doesn't need post-secondary education. Or you know what? I changed my mind. I'm now going to go to your school. And I got to get an associate's degree. It's your plan. It can't be wrong. But we should always be adjusting our plan because of that, and the kids should be a part of it, the parents should be a part of it. And right now we're not there. So I get why you're frustrated. Yeah.
One suggestion that I have is perhaps have like a guidance night where each guidance counselor kind of takes like a different kind of career pathway. Someone who's maybe going into like a technical school track, someone who's going into college. And then there's like those students that are kind of that in between average where they're kind of late bloomers, where they didn't challenge themselves perhaps as academically in elementary and middle school, and then all of a sudden like they're starting to rise to the occasion, but not to the level of AP level. They're just kind of like somewhere in the middle, and they could go any direction. By kind of breaking it out into different sessions where parents can rotate, may perhaps give us a little bit more information and also know ahead of time that scheduling is happening. Because some people think, oh, college credit, that is just for the very smart kids that fall under this category. But some don't realize what are the pros and cons between taking that and AP, which one is the better choice. Because as I went through a Facebook discussion with other parents, I learned that there are definite pros and cons depending on many different situations there that I wouldn't have thought to ask. And it just kind of was a conversation that evolved. So there's a lot of those little things that, who knew, that is helpful to understand. Because some people might not think that their kids even qualify or have that potential.
As I think about it, there are things that I sometimes take for granted because this is what I do every day. That certainly, if I leave my world of education where I work, that I'm very much ignorant to. And I'm not saying you guys are ignorant. I'm just saying there's things that like I could have that discussion right now about AP versus College Credit Plus and break down pros and cons, and but I certainly can't go to my accountant and break down the pros and cons of of filing taxes one way or the other. I count on her to tell me, here's the best way to file. So we need to do a better job putting out information. I think probably information nights are important. I also think probably just quick Q&A. Here's a question. Here's the what we think are the pros and cons. There's reasons to do College Credit Plus, there's reasons to do AP. There's reasons to do neither. I mean, there's some things that you should be aware of, and I'm not pro or con based on the surface. If I know your kid, I know the situation, what they're trying to do, then I can become very pro and con based on what your kid's up to. So no, that's really good feedback from both of you ladies. Thank you for giving that, so we can figure out how to better meet those needs and be a part of it.
I think so many times when I go to information nights, the questions that I have are as a parent, and I'm getting, the information I'm getting is coming from an educator who's talking educator speak. And I'm educated, so I've gone through school and done that, but sometimes there's the miss of what the information I need is compared to being so close to what they do, they get into the weeds of that. When I went to a college credit plus meeting, and my simple question, all I really wanted to know was, why would a 7th grader really need to do this? Like, it was, you said it was available, and then the answer was very detailed and like all these things, and really what I needed to know was, very few 7th graders do it. It's rare for a 7th grader to do it, and here's a few information. But it was hard to get answers because it was very in the weeds.
Well, I mean, I wasn't at that particular meeting, but I certainly see it happening. And so I guess we need to be very specific of what we're feeding out, and then making sure it's appropriate for the audience. Certainly when I talk to my staff, because I have one of the slide decks I showed you was some of the stuff I showed my staff with, like the green that was for their sake, so they could see it. That's a whole lot more in the weeds than I want to go tonight, because it's just a different audience and we're doing different things with that data points. And tonight hopefully people felt it was a comfortable presentation and learned a few things, and if not, I apologize. I wasted an hour of your life, and whatever your going rate is, I'll pay you back for that hour. I apologize. I did the best I could.
And I also think too that with this information, we do have a lot of families in the district where the parents or guardians have not completed college or did not have some of the opportunities, or didn't a lot of the opportunities. A lot of these opportunities our kids have now, we didn't have when we were growing up. So it's a very different world for us. Even how the college application processes is completely different. So yeah, we really need a lot more hand-holding than
and that's where
we realized.
Our guidance department is really going to work to have more personal contact time with kid and families to answer those questions, because a lot of times they become very unique questions. We can anticipate some of the big questions, but some of the uniqueness of it, like I have no idea if your child wants to go to Emory College or wants to go to Otterbein. One's out of state, both are private. I can't look at you like or I can't look and say, you're going to precision machining, right? You're going to go construction trades, you're going to do the culinary. Like, I need that information to start then crafting a plan of where we want to go. Here's what I'm very, very much aware of. And in my last 5 or 6 years, I've become more and more aware of. we are doing college and career planning, not just college planning. And we have to find the right fit for our kids. And it may not be college. That is absolutely a good thing for some students. It might be military. It might be trade school. I don't know, but we have to make sure they have a plan. And for me, that's the big part as we move forward. We have to make sure there is a plan in place. And the plan can change 100 times. It may, because they're 14 and 15 and 16 and 17. But at least we start that discussion of where we want to go, of what options we do have. And then we're putting things in place to get that done. But you're right, there are so many changes and it doesn't matter. I'm from a family, my father's last day of education was when he got out of high school. So I know what it's like to have a father who doesn't access that system that way. My mother was a Spanish and French teacher. She understood academia to the nth degree, and she taught. So I understand that world of, look, it's foreign to everybody. And just for the record, my parents, when I was the oldest, I went to college, they had no idea how the system worked. So it's not, and my mother worked in education. My father runs a pallet business and a trucking company. So he's a small business owner. So he had no help for me. We had to figure it out. Now, as you pointed out, by the time I got to my sister and brother, they were near pros. But we were going through the process, and I was the guinea pig. And so I get the trepidation as a family. I try to figure out what to do and what the best advice is. I ask, when you're having those moments where you're not sure, pick up the phone. You can certainly call me. I am not expert on anything. If you don't believe that, ask my wife. She will tell you. But I will happily kind of walk you through that process. I'll get you hooked up with the right resources. You should never feel like we're not going to get back to you to help you with it, because there's a lot of things that I don't know, you don't know, and we can work on together. So don't, because it is scary, because you're dealing with the most important thing in your world, one of your kids. So you want to make sure you don't screw it up. Then we as parents get that parent guilt, like, man, did I ruin their life? The answer is no, you didn't. No, there's nothing you can do we can't undo. But if you have those questions, reach out. That's exactly what therapy is for. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can fix all that schedule stuff. And I think those to me are the good discussions to have with a kid and a family, because it puts you in a spot where now we're on this. We have the information. You feel good about it. So please use us as a resource. And I took some notes here, some feedback. I think there's certain areas we can improve on and get better at. And this audience tonight, the questions you're asking have been asked to me at every district I've ever been at. Every parent has these same questions. This is not unique to Berea Mid-Park. It's not unique to this room. The stuff you're asking is, one, you care. It's your kid and you love them, and you're not entirely sure what it looks like. And we want to be a part of that solution for you to give you the information. And then once you have the information, you can make the choices that makes the most sense for you and your child. My last thought is, if you're going through this, please include your child in this, their young adult. Don't make decisions without ever, sometimes that's what you have to do, because they're 15, they need a curfew, they need to have some rules. I'm not suggesting turn them loose on the world, but if you're making decisions on what they're going to do post-high school, you're dealing with a young adult. They need to have some say in what life looks like. And by the way, that's really hard, because they're still yours, and they're also still kind of 15 and 16. Like they're not really, but when they graduate high school, they're kind of they kind of can start doing whatever they want. They're an adult. So please start including them in that discussion. Don't just do stuff without their input, as hard as that might be, because you've watched them back your car into your other car 4 times. You watched them not under the dishwasher and ruin laundry. You've seen all that. But we're getting ready to be adults, so we need to get them involved in this discussion. Any final questions? Well, thank you for your time. Once again, thanks for having me. I'm always happy to talk about academia and what we do here at school. I love education. If you have questions, feel free to reach out anytime. And guys, have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.